Welcome to the Diaspora.Ukraine channel. Today you are joined by Denis, Yeliseevich, Oleg Pritula, and Bogdan Borovets. Welcome, friends.
Welcome.
Today we have an important topic. As we know, the ice has already started to move. As they say, it's broken free. And now we will take a step after Putin. And for Putin, as I see it, there is a peace formula for Trump. Today we'll talk about this peace formula and possible steps that Donald Trump will take if Putin refuses to cooperate. Let's probably give the floor to Mr. Denis Yeliseevich.
Yes, hello. If we look at the next steps right now, I believe that Putin will agree, because I'm sure that he already has an agreement with Trump. There was a preliminary agreement before negotiations with our side in Ukraine. But I have no doubt that Putin will still make things difficult for us anyway.
So the main thing, with the information that's now available everywhere, you can see it. It's clear that everyone is saying, and both sides are declaring, that a start has been made, even though it's not an easy one. But the situation will get even more complicated because, of course, both sides will have to agree to some conditions, so no one will be satisfied, just like you mentioned earlier, Trump and the other parties. I would say that if you look at Trump's strategic policy, for example, it's about internal debureaucratization of his own society. Neither Putin nor Zelensky is interested in such debureaucratization. And it turns out that when America becomes strong, when it really gets on the track of the golden age, as Trump says, neither Ukraine with Zelensky nor Putin himself fit into this paradigm at all. And it's clear that Trump now needs to somehow stop the fighting in order to move on to greater cooperation later. Of course, he saw prospects for allies in Ukraine. I think, well, Putin will, of course, try to throw a wrench in the works. And what do you think, Denis? What are the main things that Putin can oppose to Trump right now?
You know, Oleg, I think nothing. I've probably talked to Denis about this many times, and many people might not agree. I think Putin is truly afraid of Trump. He is truly afraid of Trump, truly afraid of Xi Jinping. And it's not a question of respect or fear. I think he's afraid, because if Putin gets publicly humiliated just once, if they show that he's not as strong as he tries to intimidate everyone in Europe into believing, his whole story about greatness will collapse. So he's anything but an idiot. He will behave in a way to prevent that from happening. But at the same time, there's the other side of the coin, not to show that he's so easy to negotiate with. I'm telling you, he'll get on their nerves, but there's nothing to oppose him with. He needs the sanctions lifted. He needs to completely turn the page on the next nasty things he's planned. It's already stalled. Besides, let's not forget about the Kursk direction, about that situation. I publicly posted this information that I got from 3 military people about 4 days ago. That was about how, up to today, the information was completely accurate. Zelensky ordered the Kursk region held, but they only began a full withdrawal today. It happened. Syrskyi requested to withdraw earlier, but Zelensky forbade it. They were waiting for something and had some idea, but now they're pulling out. This should all be connected. We should focus on Zelensky instead of Putin, since his boasting about Kursk is now irrelevant.
Yes, it turns out that Kursk is now in such a situation that it has stopped, meaning it's already on the edge. You can't work with it anymore. You definitely can't use it as an exchange asset. So it turns out that all this energy, everything that was spent, and really a lot of Ukrainian soldiers died during this time. So it was an absurd situation. And probably, again, you say that this was probably some kind of order from the globalists, that you attack Putin there to show that we are some kind of force. And as always, they stab Ukraine in the back while practically providing nothing, not giving Ukraine a chance to win.
I'm sure, Oleg, that this was under the guidance of the United Kingdom. I think this operation was developed in the United Kingdom, and as you said, they were pushing from behind. And I think there was also a financial motivation, like, if you do this, we'll help you here as well. And for Zelensky, it was a plus. He got a boost of 5% in his ratings, a small victory, something to feed our audience, like, look how powerfully we're moving forward. But we need to look, I think, at the bottom line, at the result, pragmatically, as we always approach it. And what do we have today? For example, I spoke openly on the first day of this Kursk operation. And today, March 12th, we come out, and what do we have in the end? The lives of our people?
Exactly. Well,
We invited a 4-star general to the studio. I apologize.
yes, it turns out that Zelensky has never been a strategist, and he definitely never will be. Because if you look at Trump, he strategically builds a certain model and step by step moves toward it at this point. Even KGB agent Putin strategically tried to gain something, though he hoped Harris would win. He always believed he could dominate in that scenario.
Yes.
But here it turned out to be the opposite. And Putin understands that he's only afraid of Trump. He's not afraid of NATO or Europe. He doesn't care. On one side, he has China, of which he is basically a vassal, you could say. And on the other side, now there's Trump. And Trump's task right now is to put more pressure on Putin. But it turns out, looking at the dynamics, that Trump first called Xi and talked to him and only then spoke with Putin. This once again shows who is who. Most likely, he made an agreement with China that he would stop Putin. So he has certain goals. But what other goals does he have? I would list some other main goals. These are personal sanctions, which he can absolutely impose, and also on his inner circle. Then there are banking sanctions, which he also has, let's say. He has these kinds of factors in reserve that he can influence. Tariffs on Russian goods. And it won't be like how Biden took some steps. Here, if Trump does something, it will be real.
No, Oleg, if you were asking about Trump's levers, he has everything you listed and much more. Putin really has no leverage over Trump, but Trump has plenty.
Yes. And besides, if Putin resists too much, he still has in reserve, well, he can let oil prices drop in the process. That's the next stage. And if needed, Putin can simply be declared a terrorist. We know what Trump does with terrorists. So there could even be targeted physical elimination, but he won't stop at anything. Putin absolutely understands this. And we're interested in how adequate his reaction is. What do you think?
Oleg, I pray that everything will be as smooth and quick as possible. Why? Because look, let's imagine a situation where Putin starts acting up a lot and Trump starts putting the squeeze on him. Trump, while he's putting the squeeze on him, will have to help Ukraine. We're telling Ukraine that, and people see it as supporting and strengthening Zelensky's regime. There's an important nuance people should understand. Aid to Ukraine will only come after the war. That's the Marshall Plan and everything you've already discussed or we have. And right now, there can only be aid to Zelensky's regime. We need to get people out of the trenches, stop the war, and start working on a different Ukraine. Not all this mess that we ended up with. We need to start from scratch. By now, we should already be sitting here talking about the future. But how do we do that? How do we discuss reforms, elections, and all that? If, God forbid, this process starts to stall now. To stall such fuss? This will strengthen it and give Zelensky an advantage. I told you so. See, I'm not the problem. Let's be honest, we don't plan to live in Russia. We care about Ukraine. So we need a ceasefire and elections as soon as possible. And the election of a new president. So this is a very delicate moment. I'm worried, but I'll say it again. Let me put it this way. Trump and Putin already have a plan to completely end the war. But there are things in politics that are also a kind of game. And you have to play out this whole performance, all the acts in order. That is, you can't just jump straight to peace. You have to go through some things, a few more months.
I'm 100% sure that the future and the building of Ukraine and now the presidential elections, I'm sure that Trump no longer considers Zelensky at all as a candidate because he's not capable of making agreements. That is, it's impossible to negotiate with him. He can get emotional, turn on certain moods, and disrupt negotiations. Well, Trump isn't used to actions like that. He's been in business his whole life, and he approaches every situation like a business. To solve the problem, he wants to resolve it. not like politicians who try to disrupt or drag out the process and only pretend that they're working hard, as we say, straining themselves. That's for sure. Zelensky is already falling out of the future. Here, I think if we look much further ahead, Trump doesn't even consider a future for Putin himself. It's just a process that needs to be reached, and an alliance with Ukraine will actually make it possible to change the government in Russia sooner. Because if Ukraine turns out to be a real ally, and I believe that's its only real chance to get back on its feet, then I think it will influence both Russia and other countries. Because in the end, let me remind you, Trump has said several times that overall it would be better to denuclearize the entire world. And for that, first you need to change the governments of all these countries and in the end finish off communist China, which is still standing on clay feet, no matter how great they try to make it look. But at this stage, there is a pause of hostilities. That's just the first step, and then negotiations will begin, which I'm sure about. I agree with you that Trump has many more chances and moves that he knows about and perhaps isn't talking about right now.
What you said about nuclear disarmament, I feel like Trump has something like an end-of-term goal. To take such a direct step, seemingly to historically end the war in Israel, in Ukraine, and if he could also achieve nuclear disarmament, wow, that would be just incredible. So yes. Bodan, did you want to say something? Do you have something to add?
I would just like, with your permission, to ask our viewers, our subscribers, to share this stream, to share this information, because right now a powerful disinformation campaign has started. And for some reason, comments are disappearing, our videos are disappearing, people are telling us they can't find them. So please share this stream and subscribe to the profiles of Mr. Ole Pritula and Mr. Denis Yeliseevich. Please share the stream. We would greatly appreciate it. This is crucial information and significant events are unfolding. My apologies, Mr. Denis.
Yes, I want to clarify what Ole said and add that people should realize Trump is dealing with the current reality. Putin and Zelensky are both factors. Many who oppose Zelensky's regime ask me why Trump isn't sanctioning Zelensky now, but he's working with the present situation. The main goal now is to achieve peace. The issue with Zelensky has been resolved. Today, Victoria Spartz, understand I'm telling people, Trump can't say everything. There are certain rules of the game. He can't just come out and say everything directly. But Victoria Spartz went on American television today and said it perfectly. If Ukrainians are idiots, let them elect Zelensky for a second term. Then, to put it bluntly, nothing will be left of Ukraine at all. You will lose the lands that you managed to keep. This is being said by a congresswoman. What more do you need? Okay, that one is bad. What else do you need? It was said directly. So people, this is the most important thing right now. We can't allow this catastrophe to happen again.
Exactly. And the fact that Spartz, we remember that she was practically the first to speak out about this corrupt gang around Zelensky. She raised this issue, and you saw how during this marathon a storm was raised against Spartz.
There was an entire campaign against her.
Absolutely, everyone got involved there, and you can see both the Democratic Party and globalists from all sides. They just made her out to be someone who wants to destroy Ukraine. The pressure was that intense, but now her words are only being confirmed, and as openly as she speaks, she definitely knows the situation from the inside. With Yermak, with Zelensky, and this whole group around the president who are 100% to blame for the fact that the war has been going on for 3 years now. It could have been done a long time ago. You could even say it was clear that Trump was elected. At that point, Zelensky needed to use his brain, if he has one, and immediately make a deal with Trump. And surely by that time, the fighting would have already been stopped. Even if Putin had seen some real initiative from Zelensky toward Trump, he would have reacted differently. But Putin just laughs at this situation. And honestly, I even feel sorry for Trump that he spent so much energy on Zelensky's team.
Oleg, you know, it's even kind of upsetting in a way. Zelensky could have even outplayed them. It was the KGB that supported Trump. But the KGB misjudged, assuming Zelensky was clueless. And Yermak, by the way, Victoria Spartz was exposing him, saying his family's ties to the main intelligence directorate were obvious. It's also, they foresaw that they would support the Democrats. They foresaw all of this. But if, as you say, there was any real intelligence there and Ukrainian interests were truly the priority, they would have supported Trump. I mean, obviously, they can't interfere in American elections, but look at what Duda did, for example. He came here and the entire Polish diaspora supported most of the Republicans and Trump. Zelensky could have done that, but instead he visited a Pennsylvania factory with Democrats and took photos. If he'd acted differently, maybe elections would be happening this spring. Putin would have been completely confused, but instead Zelensky and Yermak keep giving him advantages throughout the war and now in negotiations. For example, they support the Democrats, causing a scandal in the Oval Office. This scandal should have erupted 11 or 12 days ago, so everything could have been signed by now, maybe even in Saudi Arabia. In these 10 days, how many people have died? How many rockets and drones have struck? How much suffering has occurred? And how many have left Ukraine? Well, to me, this seems elementary.
Absolutely. And notice that in the last little while, literally in these past few months, it has become clear that Europe is socialism. European socialist countries are united. How much do they negatively impact the situation in Ukraine? How much do they want to keep fighting? War is beneficial for them. Socialists always benefit from war because to stay in power, they need to distract people from the situation. And for that, by having an external enemy, you now understand why they stay in power. The same thing is happening with Putin. He needs an external war. The same situation is happening. Europe needs a constant war.
So, for example, the head of German intelligence came out and said that Ukraine needs to keep fighting until 2030. That's what he said. That's it. He said it directly.
I would like to add that yesterday I made a video translation of the press conference with Rubio Waltz, where they talk about peace, that Ukraine agreed to peace. You can find it on our channel. And this video became quite popular. It already has about 100,000 views, which is significant for our small channel. And what do we see in the comments? That Russians mostly, this really stirred up the Russian media space because Russians do not want peace. They do not want a truce. There are probably already more than 1,000 comments here, and they say that we don't need a truce, we don't need a truce because we will be deceived again, and that it will benefit Ukraine. And how is that? Trump started restoring aid to Ukraine. Today they say one thing and another. They also have such disinformation going on. They don't know that Trump took a step and stopped aid to Ukraine, and only after he saw that Putin was not stopping the offensive. And there were no steps towards each other, only then did he stop the aid, and only when Zelensky agreed to cooperate. The aid was stopped, but because the offensive did not stop, it was restored. But almost all of them are for the war, to completely defeat Ukraine. And we know that the demographic situation is not in Ukraine's favor. According to research, in 6 to 12 months, Ukraine may face very serious problems. It turns out that both Russian propaganda and the liberal pro-Biden media propaganda completely coincide, just like the propaganda in Ukraine for continuing the war. How would you comment on this, Mr. Denis?
Bogdan, all the comments you showed and everything you said, there's no need to strongly distinguish between Ukrainian and Russian propaganda anymore. They work completely identically. If someone writes to you that we were promised peace in Minsk and Istanbul, and now again for the third time, but what does Trump have to do with those negotiations? And even more clearly, it was the Ukrainian side that disrupted them. Well, Boris Johnson came. I didn't say this, you didn't say this. All of this was said by Arahamia on Mosishuk's broadcast. Arahamia was part of the negotiations. Arestovich, who was also at the table. Well, that's it, but now the situation has changed. Now, at the negotiating table, you could say we have the Russian Yermak with strong connections to Russia. That's why the negotiations are progressing so successfully in Saudi Arabia and yesterday with Russia. It's their own people dealing with their own. So, I'm serious. And we should be glad about this. Just the only thing, don't drag Trump into this, and don't get infected with obscurantism, like the Russians have. We need to approach the issue rationally. People talk and comment, where are the security guarantees? I want to say, the security guarantee is Donald Trump and the United States of America, the participation of the United States of America. But the guarantee of danger is the ongoing war. I'll give you one guarantee of danger. It's a war that doesn't stop. Everything else will come later. Let's not try to solve a problem that hasn't happened yet.
Of course, Denis, did you notice that the phrase 30 days only appeared in Saudi Arabia? It wasn't there before, so I get the impression that this is exactly Yermak and his group. That's their message. Why set any time limits here? It's very strange. And actually, because it appeared in Saudi Arabia, before that it didn't exist at all. Then suddenly the term appeared. It's quite short. I mean, what are 30 days? They could have said, let's stop for 3 months.
Or even indefinitely.
Well, indefinitely.
We pause to negotiate peacefully, then proceed.
Otherwise, it turns out, and after 30 days, what then from Ukraine? What's next?
They'll extend it by 30 days.
Well, that's again just to start bargaining. That's how I see it. How else can you do it?
Sorry, I don't know how accurate this is, but I'd like to briefly play the general today's interview with General Jack Keane. He's a 4-star general who served under Reagan, and Trump awarded him. He says that things aren't going so well in Russia either. And why am I going to play this clip?
This is what Russia took from Ukraine. Do you think there's any chance they'll still keep some of the occupied territories?
I'm absolutely sure they will. President Trump has been discussing this topic for several weeks now, and he's seriously considering this possibility. For those who think Russia is all-powerful and Ukraine has no chance, it's worth remembering a couple of things. The map you're showing is from the Institute for the Study of War, and it hasn't changed for 18 months. Yes, the Russians have achieved some minor tactical successes, but they're losing 30,000 soldiers a month, and 100 to 150 tanks every month for the past year. Also, Ukraine is holding Russian territory. They took it, and they're holding it. This hasn't happened since World War II. They've been there for 7 months, and the Russians can't drive them out. They tried, and tried again. Russia has a lot of problems. Of course, they have a powerful disinformation campaign, false stories about how mighty they are, how they're going to sweep away Ukraine. But that's not happening. If the United States supports them, it won't happen. Putin has plenty of reasons to sit down at the negotiating table.
Thank you for your analysis, General.
Well, that's the interview. How would you comment on it?
I have respect for this general. And naturally, things aren't going so well for Putin, but Zaluzhny also made such a calculation. Do you remember what message Zaluzhny left with? He wrote an article in The Economist where he said, I expected that with these losses, Russia would stop. All the textbooks, the way my teachers taught me, and everyone who is an authority for me in military affairs. Everyone says he would have stopped, but he didn't. The general says they're losing 30,000 people, but Putin doesn't care and will just use more convicts. For the general, it's just numbers, but for us, it's our people's lives. He measures by days or months, but daily our land is shelled and people die. So I don't see it that way. The war must end. I do agree things aren't going well for Putin.
Well, there's another point here. After this stream, we'll make a video where the general describes important factors influencing Putin. And besides the fact that things aren't going so well for him, President Trump will use other important factors. For example, he will completely lift all restrictions on weapons that were imposed during Biden's time. And maybe then, well, I think that's when Ukraine will get Lend-Lease. How possible is that? What do you think, Mr. Oleg?
I think, Bogdan, that Trump will still be pressing Putin to stop the fighting now and in the future so that this ceasefire continues. Because Trump is focused on peace, he's a man of morals. And from his point of view, the way people are dying is the biggest mystery to him. He just can't understand it. That's why I think that since he started these negotiations, he will still push for his goal. I'm sure of it. and most likely, as I see it. And no matter how much those who want war try to twist things, Zelensky, Europe, and Putin, he has his own plan that he can't talk about. Denis was right. I think he has his own calculations because he's not just talking to Zelensky, not just to Putin. He spoke with Xi. The first person he called was Xi. And I'm sure that one of the reasons for this war is that China also stabbed Putin in the back, because the one who benefits from a weakened Europe and a weakened Russia is Xi.
And the United States.
And the United States as well. I'm sure that if China was confident that Kamala Harris would still win, their next target would be California, together with that communist Newsom, who has already pretty much destroyed the state. It's already burned down over there. It's just everything. There are tons of homeless people. Nothing works. So it turns out that they kept talking about the increase in jobs, but it turns out that 80% of those jobs were government positions. In other words, these are jobs paid for by taxpayers. It's absurd. And the way he welcomed Xi so enthusiastically, that was just a year or two ago. You remember, he cleaned up all the streets. Everything was immediately in order. He was basically opening the doors to China even back then. And accordingly, China had a plan. Now he'll push Putin in the back. He'll start a war, weaken Europe, weaken Russia. And with the help of the Democratic Party, he'll finish off any remaining living forces that have a healthy voice in this region. But it turned out that America held on because of those institutions that were established 250 years ago, and now it has turned around 180 degrees. And now everything is being reconsidered. With Trump, the geopolitical situation is completely different because he can strike at a single country, even Europe, and influence them. The same goes for entire groups of countries. And his reach is so wide, Canada, Mexico, the Panama Canal, and you see that Elon is already influencing European countries politically. That means he will keep dominating the more right-wing forces there are. And the right-wing forces, of course, will most likely destroy Europe. And a strong Ukraine in alliance with America could seriously damage Russia's internal politics, I'm sure.
Bohdan, let me add something. It seems to me that if Trump wanted to start from a position of strength and with a hint at war, he would have started with that. That's actually more in Trump's character. If you look at his biography, at least that's how I feel about him as a person. He would have gone straight to Putin. Here's how it's going to be. Or publicly started, I'm giving Lend-Lease. I'm giving this from a position of strength, like Putin, look. I think that Trump specifically wants to end the war. That's the first thing. And second, I'm not very optimistic about what you quoted at the beginning. Why? What I said would help Zelensky's regime. Our people are there now. Do we need nukes, and for whom? Nukes or Lend-Lease in Zelensky's hands? For whom? Sorry, but if Zelensky gets Lend-Lease, Ukraine could be finished immediately. No one will return, and it will turn into another Afghanistan. America will eventually leave Ukraine as it did Afghanistan, abandoning everything because of reckless Zelensky, his regime, and people who profit from war. This money is so easy that it won't return to social life or the market where it should be earned. What kind of war is this? In America, dollars grow on trees and the printer runs while we fight to earn a living. These things are much more subtle and frightening.
I partially agree, but still, we can't rule out even that scenario because some types of weapons can only operate with the permission or guidance of the United States, for example, a long-range missile. And if permission is not given, then this missile won't go anywhere. It won't hit any target. But this is a hypothetical scenario. I agree with you that it's unlikely, but still, for Putin to be more talkative, I don't rule out this scenario either, because Trump really wants to achieve peace with minimal effort. Will it work out? I ask our viewers and listeners to comment and share this stream. What do you think? Will Putin go for cooperation or will he try to sabotage? Mr. Oleg, what do you think?
Well, look, from this example, if many people say that Trump and Putin are somehow allies, but look, Trump immediately on the second day restored the support, so he doesn't intend to play any other games with Putin. He's going his own way. He's playing his own game. That is, he made Zelensky sit down at the negotiating table and immediately opened the gates. So that was his clear move. And most importantly, he's so active that Zelensky is already under pressure. He realized he won't last long there. The armed forces of Ukraine, let's say, can hold out for some time, but Zelensky's administration, without America's help, would collapse the very next day, really. And after that, just imagine, if he had canceled now, then there would be special sanctions against Zelensky and the entire presidential group. That's it. And you can't just impose these sanctions like that. It would be illegal, definitely. That's why Zelensky backed down, nothing more. He's afraid, let's say, of this bureaucratic machine, of losing it and losing power. He'd rather delay things a bit more because he understands the position of strength better than anyone. Do you agree?
Yes, I completely agree. And well, you just have to really understand who Zelensky is. He does everything in such a way. Now he's in a bad situation, but he'll adapt it as much as possible to still hold on, even in this situation. If he and Yermak realize that the war is ending and they're going to be out, they'll try to make it as smooth as possible because, as I said, the American sanctions won't just disappear when it's all over, and Trump doesn't forget or forgive anything. And even, as Bowden said, Trump could have, okay, without Lend-Lease, but at least started with some bigger weapons. He understood who he would be strengthening. He understands, I'm not going to strengthen Ukraine, I'm going to strengthen Zelensky's regime. And he cut that down. And let's still take a step back to how it all happened. The fact that we were cut off from intelligence data and the planes in Poland turned around, the American ones with scheduled weapons, was because of Zelensky's behavior in the Oval Office. Not because someone in Ukraine is bad, we're not even Putin. Zelensky behaved incorrectly and the military specifically suffered because of it. That's it. So here we, as Ukrainians, need to look at our president, Zelensky, and his actions.
It turns out that Zelensky is simply being held like a puppet by the globalists. And now, using Trump, they're kind of probing what Trump is really willing to agree to. They're testing him right now. Throughout his life, he has shown that he gets what he wants. And he confidently says that America will be a country with a golden future, as he likes to say. And that's what he's doing now. I'm sure that he will be able to solve this in the shortest possible time.
So, Oleg, you talk about the golden age of America, but what was Zelensky trying to push in the Oval Office? Well, yes, you have the ocean separating you, but you're going to have problems, aren't you? Then you and Trump got mad, stopped him and said, "Don't tell us. We're already discussing this. Everything is fine with us, but Zelensky is traveling the world selling the future war, as our mutual friend says. Now he wants to claim Ukraine is a shield for the United States protecting it from Russia. These are signs of something unhealthy. Ukraine protecting the United States from Russia."
Well, to prove your point, I'd like to... Well, there was news today. Some saw it, some didn't, but they put it up on the screen. The Canadian leader apologized and canceled the electricity tariff after Trump's threats. So Canada, which was so tough and threatened to keep fighting, and yet, because of Trump's position, Canada had to apologize. I think it will be the same for those who oppose Trump's plans.
Of course, Bodan. You know, I want to calm people down a bit, if you don't mind, Bodan, so you can look at the topic of the trade war. That's what this is all about. There's propaganda being spread in Ukraine right now. Maybe the diaspora is watching us and they don't monitor Ukrainian media as closely. Let me tell you, there's propaganda in Ukraine right now saying that Trump is leading the United States to collapse and that there will soon be impeachment, recession, devaluation, and everything else. But let's take a look. Yesterday there was a great photo from the Oval Office. Dell, the Minister of Commerce, Howard Latnick, and these are the people, and Musk. Self-made billionaires in the market. Would they really do something so foolish? They know economics from real experience, not theory. They know exactly what they're doing and understand the trade balance with Canada. This is a calculated move, factoring in what Trump sees as past mistakes from his first term, though really maybe he just wasn't tough enough. Trump acts in America's interests, so there's nothing to fear. Claims that Trump is clueless are just media talk. I saw this today in Soros's media, specifically the Ukrainian outlet Novoye Vremya. Trump's gone too far, and they claim there's a 40% chance of recession. I just laugh. They're trying to make multi-billionaires look like idiots, and people believe it. That's what's scary.
Absolutely, especially since Trump explains that people don't listen to information, that over the last 80 years, tariffs from other countries, including Europe and Canada, have always been much higher compared to the United States, which always put America in an uncomfortable position. I'm sure Trump would agree to zero tariffs. Just remove the tariffs from this side. Can you imagine the logic that in Canada there are tariffs of 200 or 300% on things like butter and milk, such simple things? In other words, the socialists have just squeezed America from all sides any way they could. It's just like a cash cow. And Trump says, listen, I'm the master of my own country. I want to bring order. I will treat you the same way you treat me. And for that, he keeps some tariffs, maybe emphasizes them to bring things back on the right track. That's all there is to it. So his position is, let's say, to restore justice for his country. And that's completely normal. Of course, all sorts of leftist media will try to show Trump as some kind of monster. But Trump is actually a peacemaker, and he's for honest, proper economic relations with other countries. Agreed? And then we work together. But of course, if they used to get more dividends, that's what they're fighting for. And the leftist media definitely fuel the fire against Trump.
Listen, Oleg, he doesn't have any problems with Millie, with Argentina, with trade. He doesn't even have any problems with the Arabs. His real issues are with the leftists, the European Union. When Macron got it, when Trump threatened him with a wine tariff saying, I'll put a 25% tariff on overnight, everything was resolved. And Canada, all the leftists, all the globalist leftists are outraged. That's the whole answer right there.
Exactly.
And Argentina's economy isn't much different from Canada's. There's just a couple €100 billion difference in gross domestic product between Canada and Argentina. Argentina is in the top 20 economies, despite all the problems in the world. It's among the 20 largest economies. So I think everything is obvious here if you want to understand the issue. But if someone is a victim of propaganda, that's a problem.
Well, and now it's pretty much what we talked about earlier. A new League of Nations is being formed, which will include Argentina, Nayib Bukele from El Salvador, America, I think Israel, and Poland. And it would be good if Ukraine could join this league as well. That way, it would really be a league of free countries. It gives the right attitude toward private property and freedom of speech.
Yes, that's what I meant. Freedom of speech. In such a company, you can't act out anymore. You can't jail people for reposts, silence them, or skip elections. You're basically set to go in the right direction.
You're an outcast. You're an outcast.
If you do something like that, of course.
And it's very easy, kind of like litmus paper, because before the Democrats and Biden used to go there, even sat down, met, and talked about freedom of speech. Well, that time it was funny, definitely. But now there are completely different forces. And it's time for Zelensky and all his clique to understand that the power in America has changed. It's become absolutely different. And you need to take that into account. If you couldn't figure that out strategically and ended up with so many problems, he could have already adjusted by now. But it's clear that the globalists are holding him by the throat, definitely.
By the way, you reminded me about Meloni, about Italy. I should mention this, maybe people don't know. Again, Trump can't say certain things even if he wants to right now. But Javier Milei deleted all photos with Zelensky from his history. Giorgia Meloni deleted them too. That means it's over, he's finished. For civilized, normal leaders, he's a washed-up pilot.
Definitely.
Well, for Ukraine, the only way out is to stop the fighting now, to stop the presidential elections. And God willing, with the support of Elon and Trump, really choose a person who could speak the same language as them. because all these old couches that exist in Ukraine, Trump doesn't even understand them. He doesn't understand what they're talking about. And he can't deal with them at all. He even tries, like Zelensky, he tries something, but nothing works out. So Ukrainians now need to be more active on the X platform, on the Truth platform, to get direct information. And then you'll be speaking the same language as us, because we track every word of what's happening. But of course, from people who are making history now, making a bright history. So you need to join this bright side, not stay in some kind of bubble of darkness.
And we get information directly from the source. If Javier Milei wants to say something, he writes on X, or his assistant does, and we get that information instantly. But when you use websites, even if you have 6 or 7 sites on your desktop or in your phone feed, that means 7 chief editors got instructions from the owner or a group of shareholders who cooperate with leftists. They reworked it and brought it to you the way they want. Especially when, yeah, I'm even talking about the biggest American media, but if we're talking about local ones like in Ukraine, then you only get what you're supposed to get, according to someone like Soros and his partners in Ukraine. That's it. But you need to strive to get information directly without any filter. The filter, at most, is that you trust some blogger or expert. That's the maximum. But it's better to get it directly. If you don't understand something, you go and listen to someone you trust. But not like when 7 or 5 people sit down and decide for you what information you should get.
I absolutely agree. And even when asking questions on air, come to us. It would be good if you had already reviewed the main information. Trump, Elon Musk, the whole Trump team. And then you come and ask real questions, not questions from some marathon shows.
For marathons, yes.
Look, pay attention. A year ago, President Trump met with the Prime Minister of Ireland, and you get information directly. Here, you can even get new information in a minute, directly, without any interpretation. In Ukraine, all these media experts, that's what they do now. This propaganda, it's lies, complete lies. And this was done deliberately to turn Ukraine's best ally into an enemy. And if Trump's team hadn't been so capable of influencing everyone and creating algorithms to achieve their goal, maybe that's how it would have been. Ukraine would have been cut off from this aid from its most powerful ally. But thanks to countering this disinformation and propaganda, because Trump's team is very effective, they were able to do everything that could help Ukraine end this war and end it in the best possible position for themselves. Comment, friends, subscribe to the channels of Mr. Oleg and Mr. Denis and share this information. Mr. Oleg, how would you comment?
I would like to say that Trump immediately shows who else, which country will be next in the League of Nations. Everyone he accepts and everyone who is his friend, he demonstrates this. He says, look, he wanted to do the same with Zelensky, but you see what it led to. And it turns out that everyone Trump met is already a kind of league that will move toward development and will multiply their economies, while Zelensky is just an outcast there. He will be hanged. Like, you just can't behave like that with Trump.
Yes, generally in the civilized world and the Oval Office, this will be historic.
Yes, and nevertheless, for the sake of Ukraine, Trump does not rule out such cooperation through Zelensky because he understands that it will benefit the people of Ukraine and the people of America. And today a journalist asked him if Zelensky could sign, if he could come back. And Trump said, yes, come on, come over. And he also receives and meets with these leftists because, for example, in Britain, there are also conservative forces, very powerful ones, but right now they are not in power. But in order to support this large part, for example, of Britain, he will still meet with these leftists just to have a more powerful ally in the future and, so to speak, on his side. He uses every opportunity. I think this is a very favorable tactic.
He deals with reality, as we discussed today. Putin, Zelensky, and the leftists are all realities. He met with Starmer, but he can't refuse such meetings. It's politics. Starmer visited, but we know Elon Musk will back Reform United Kingdom and another conservative leader. Timing is key. They tried to push for early elections in Britain after those cases of mass rapes and everything else. See, here we complain about Ukraine, but the British didn't really start making a fuss either. That's what's scary. And what led to this? The original cause? They cancelled the elections there. There were rapes committed by Islamists, and they kept silent, but you can't stay silent. And why did they stay silent? Because those corporate media didn't cover it. Didn't I see an article in the Washington Post and all the others? Politico? About this case in Britain, about the rape? There was something mentioned in passing. Only in X it was real, with documents, with testimonies. Nobody hears about Tony Robinson. In Ukraine they don't know who he is, but Musk supports him, the guy who's under repression in Britain and fighting for this. That's why I say all this is especially dangerous for Ukraine. Because our people look at this and say, see, in Britain you can get arrested for posts, the police come in Romania you can cancel elections, what else can you do there? But these are really old European countries, civilized ones. And in Ukraine, of course, democracy looks good compared to that. That's why it's scary. You can't let even a molecule of this happen. And before, 20 years ago, the world reacted to this much more sharply, and the sense was much more acute. That's why now a conservative, now a Republican. Now Trump is basically a Democrat from 20 years ago, but today he's considered an ultra-right extremist. Or we are called ultra-right extremists, but we're just normal, we're Democrats from 20 years ago.
Because our minds are shaped by how business works, how to be pragmatic. And now, Trump is a businessman, and that's normal. You know the statistics. When you have 500 clients, there's always one who's a bit crazy, but they're your clients. They're like your children. You treat them like children. Well, they misbehave a little, that's all. You just need to give them a couple of slaps on the head. That's what Trump is doing now, giving those slaps to Zelensky. And those slaps are so strong that he's flying back and forth. But that's just the beginning. But that's where you need to start with discipline. You can't just immediately punish him too harshly. But with slaps on the head, you can solve all the issues. And in the end, I think Trump already has a clear verdict for Zelensky after that meeting in the White House.
I think Oleg, he's had it since 2016 when information about Burisma was requested and when Trump got impeached because of him, because Zelensky didn't provide that information. I think Trump is somewhat biased against Zelensky. He's not biased against Ukraine, but he is somewhat biased against Zelensky. If Trump were biased against Ukraine, he would have said, Putin, take it. But he didn't do that. Even now, after everything, he could have chosen not to return the intelligence data. But for some reason, he did return it. That's it. In my opinion, everything is so obvious unless you're biased and don't get information properly. But people have been brainwashed. I want to say, I didn't expect that our people could be turned into completely different people in just a year, just like the Russians. I left Ukraine because of repression, but I was still leaving a normal society. Now it's just something else. I was horrified when I saw TikToks and Reels. A few women pretended there was an alarm, but we weren't going to the shelter. We needed to suit up. I remembered how Trump was mocked for that Zelensky suit. Are you serious? Have people lost it? This is madness. It makes no rational sense. They've become like this and are even happy, like they have Stockholm syndrome. Serious psychiatrists should address this. We still have to get out of it ourselves. This is political, not random.
But look at the situation. Who does Trump represent now? He represents 70% of his own people, not the bureaucratic machine. Who does Zelensky represent? Some 4% or so.
Marginals.
Marginals, that's it. And who does Putin represent? Holding elections for the 5th time at gunpoint after changing the constitution. He doesn't represent anyone. So now the real power is the one that represents the people, their own people, not the bureaucratic machine and deep states, which exist both in Ukraine and in the KGB as well. So people need to turn to those who actually represent the people, not those who don't. Well, I don't want to use certain words here. Well, that's it.
Well, I agree here.
And they still keep asking questions, writing comments about Musk, that apparently Musk will be turning off Starlink. And it's even our big, propaganda media outlets that do this, the ones funded by our bureaucratic money, like Radio Svoboda. It's open, it's absolutely allowed. You can know what Ukrainian media write and what they talk about. Their narratives are completely those of the Democratic Party. And, for example, about Starlink. Elon Musk has already said more than once that he is not turning it off. He is not planning to turn off Starlink because he wants to. So I want to reassure everyone so they don't worry about this. And they write, alternatives to Starlink. Why write about this when Elon Musk is not going to turn it off? And this is a strategic advantage for Ukraine. Russia can't do anything to Starlink, can't turn it off. And this is the most reliable connection at the moment, and there is practically no alternative. What they're writing there, the panic they're stirring up right now, they're trying to destroy all this and discredit Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Well, how else can you explain it?
No, Bodan, that's how you understand it. That's it. Musk says no matter what happens, even if we send Zelensky to a neutral country under sanctions, I won't turn off Starlink, because Zelensky is not Ukraine, and Ukraine is not Zelensky. And you say, they're taking it now. And by the way, this isn't financed by the United States Agency for International Development. It's the United States Agency for Global Media. There's such an organization. That's the one. I specifically looked into it. Yeah. It's the same taxpayer money. They keep stirring it up anyway. Sternenko goes and comments on Cristiano Ronaldo's post. He congratulates his mom and wife on March 8th. Sternenko writes to him like, this won't last long. World War III is coming soon. We're already acting like Hamas or something. Why are you getting involved there? And then Krotevich writes this kind of post insulting Musk, calling him names and all that. Doesn't Musk notice? He sees everything and there will be consequences. Eventually Zelensky and the others will have to answer, yet they keep spreading propaganda. Why bother people during their holiday, acting like there's no war? Why get involved with Ronaldo? Who are you? No, I'll go write it. There's a reason for this. Sternenko isn't just acting randomly. His handlers direct him. Someone needs this. Ukraine has its own deep state, closely tied to the Democrats. When things settle, they stir things up again. Musk said he won't touch Starlink, but then it's claimed he wants to turn it off. Someone wants this.
Denis, do you understand who Zelensky is afraid of right now? He's afraid of Trump and Elon Musk, who will come and count everything he's messed up there. That's all. And if before, remember, we used to say that Ukraine needed Deutsche United States of America. No, Ukraine needs Deutsche United States of America. You don't even need to put anyone here. You need to deal with this directly. Elon Musk can easily handle it. And that's the biggest threat for him. That's why all these marathons are aimed at saying that Trump is bad, Musk is bad. And they also say that Trump and Musk can't agree with each other, that they have some problems between them. Today, Donald Trump wrote on Truth, people love Elon Musk, a great patriot. And it's nice to see. He really emphasizes that there's no need for any of that extra stuff. And he immediately cuts off all these marathons at the root.
Yes.
They work non-stop with talking points and propaganda, but then Trump appears and it's over. Nothing remains.
And if this marathon and all of them were for Ukraine, then right now they would be airing this broadcast we're doing, for example, or showing people how things really are. But no, they need to show people something completely different. Sternenko, for example.
I would like to invite our subscribers, everyone who is watching, to share the stream and also subscribe to the X platform, Gentlemen Oleg and Denis. There you will directly know the most important resources, and through them you will be able to follow the news directly, because the first resource, as Mr. Denis said, is the best way to get information. There you can directly hear from Musk, and also hear from Donald Trump and all politicians, famous people, and all Ukrainian politicians are there, even though they spread propaganda that it's a bad company and so on. That is, network. But in reality, it's the only platform where there is no censorship right now. Truth. There are problems with truth in Ukraine. I don't know why, but people complain that they can't connect to truth. Maybe they put some artificial restrictions there. But you can also find out, for example, what's happening. They say that Trump is arguing with Musk. No, yesterday Trump bought Tesla. He bought a Tesla, and since he can't drive himself, unfortunately they don't allow him. The president is not allowed, so he will give this Tesla to someone. I don't know, maybe you know this information, but still, it's not an easy friendship. They are united by one goal, to make their country great. And that's exactly it, I remember, and Zelensky said in his first term, let's make Ukraine great. Now, he doesn't mention it anymore because he got involved with the leftists, but I think every Ukrainian would like Ukraine to be peaceful and prosperous, and the president was also focused on that idea. The important thing is just to cooperate with Donald Trump, and all of this can become a reality. Mr. Oleg, I don't know how you are with time, Mr. Denis and Mr. Oleg.
Basically, we can,
If there are topics, yes.
yes, we can thank our viewers at this moment. We will try to provide information regularly. Let's say everything that reaches us at the speed of light. And I ask all viewers to subscribe to the X platform and support Denis and Diaspora Ukraine, because your support will, so to speak, help expand our audience even more. That way there will be more influence. And on Elon Musk and on Trump to influence them more effectively. We can have an impact depending on how big we are, and the size of our channels will help at some point, perhaps, let's say, to influence them more effectively. But you can also write directly to Musk, Elon, and to the entire Trump team. That is, I invite everyone to be on the bright side, on the side of people with common sense, and support our audience. And make sure that Ukraine's future is truly bright in alliance with the United States of America.
Exactly. What would you say in conclusion, Mr. Denis?
I completely agree with Oleg.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you to those who are watching us, to our subscribers. Share this stream. Thanks to the soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine. Glory to Ukraine.